My name is Toby. I'm the CEO of Salon Studio. And my talk is on Nocode APIs. So let's just go through the agenda. So first of all, I'm going to, for those of you, well, actually, let me ask you a question. How many people are comfortable with what APIs are? So I'll talk a little bit about that, at least my perspective of things. Then I want to talk a little bit about why they're important, and particularly some of the advantages. Then I was going to talk about the downsides that come with this, the approaches that I'm talking about today. And then I won't try and connect to Nocode. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that come out when you start to join really leverage APIs. And then finally, I'll do a little bit of a demo for our studio because I'll show you how the stuff comes together. And then just a couple of ideas about what I think is interesting from Nocode, and particularly what I just talked about. Okay, so first of all, the very standard thing, which some of you may know, is the API itself. What band is it around? But effectively, the acronym is application framework. The interesting thing about it is it's really used to connect different systems together, and particularly hides the implementation from the pure functionality. It creates like a contract. And I think it's really, APIs have become the cornerstone. I mean, getting a page from a website is an API request. But now, and particularly in the last few years, it's just exploded. And nearly every service now has an API to it. Everyone says, hey, we've got APIs, and you can connect to it. And the tools like Zapier and Make have kind of leveraged all of that sort of connectivity. You can get stuff from Airtable. I mean, actually, we use APIs to get designs for the thing. You can generate AI images using APIs and translate. I mean, APIs can do everything. And really, what we kind of came from with Bravo is to say, look, there's something interesting we can go here, go beyond the sort of standard functionality. There's quite a lot to unpack in this slide, so I'll try and talk it through. But really, I mean, interestingly, the lady from software talked a little about some of this, but I've got a slightly different take on it. Really, if you go back to sort of early days of when computing was really taking off, everybody was doing everything themselves. And then what slowly happens over the years is pieces which were really not core to the business, they kind of said, look, I don't want to do this, it's too much effort, let's get somebody else to focus on. And that kind of has been progressing. You've gone from all in one place through to simplifying it, through to having somebody put all the equipment into a big data warehouse. And then AWS came along and said, hey, you know what, we can have a warehouse, and you can just use our computers, and so people don't have to worry about hardware. And then somebody else came along and said, you know what, maybe you don't have to worry about the actual operating system of the hardware, and you can just write some functions. And then really what I see as a progression of this is really the focus on APIs. The SaaS businesses, and all these kind of companies are stacking on top of each other. AWS worries about computers, then maybe a SaaS company worries about how those things fit together, and they present an API to do something else. And I think, for me, this is a very powerful concept. And it really, thinking about driving it from sort of an API-first perspective means you can open up to a whole bunch of new ways of doing things much faster, rather than trying to do everything yourself, or pieces of things yourself. And I think this is the key part of this, is that it's really about the sort of SaaS businesses providing APIs that makes this happen. So the next part of this is really the downsides. And whilst there's a lot of great functionality that comes from leveraging APIs and SaaS businesses like this, there are some challenges. If you don't have a network connectivity if you're offline, it all kind of goes away. You don't have that. It's much harder to work. You've also got to think about, although there might be some great functionality, only that contract with the API, the interface it provides, really limits what you can do. So although it might be able to do a bunch more things, only what they expose is that API connection, that sort of interface is what you can do. So you have to make sure that that's available. And also, you're relying on third parties. A great example of this is AWS. If AWS goes down with all of its great systems, which rely on their APIs to work, then half the internet stops. So there are problems with it. But the pros often outweigh the cons. So it becomes a very powerful system. So to Nocode. So I mean, I think probably some of these first points have been said like many times over the last days. Everybody wants to find tools to make things more efficient. Particularly in business, because a lot of this focus on ops, design ops, product ops. People are building teams within companies to say, look, we can automate this, we can make this faster. And it's just generally trying to think, how do we automate it? And obviously, Nocode is a great way of doing that. But the thing that's really key for me is the classic product management, which is people don't want a drill, they want the outcome, right? So it's not so much, I think we've got to make sure we don't focus too much on no-code as an outcome. But no-code is really a way of helping people create without what's and it's easy to get drawn up into let's do something amazing. But remember, we've got to get to what the outcome is and make sure that we're helping the users get to what they need. And really, I think SaaS-driven APIs are a fantastic tool for this. And that's really what we've done for that. So we've built Bravo to be effectively a way of creating a UI APIs. Trying to create as many. Every time we came something we needed to do, we try to figure a way of using APIs to leverage the best tools. So rather than us say, let's build a design part of Bravo, we said Figma's, Adobe Figma, so I don't say no. Figma's the best tool for that. Let's figure out how we can work with Figma. Rather than us say, let's build a backend. It's the best tool for that. So let's just use that. Rather than us trying to figure out all of the mobile features like notifications, deep linking, let's use Firebase for that. And try and leverage all these things and actually build it into the real focus of the company so that everything we do is around working with APIs and making APIs easier and handling them. Because APIs are challenging to work with. If they don't work, if they go wrong, it makes it very difficult to figure out what's happening. And so we want to make that as simple as possible. So this is really what I'm basically saying. Traditionally, you've got your sort of the way things would work would be, particularly in mobile development, whether it's no-code or not. You build your app, you build your logic, they go together, and then particularly mobile is really hard because you've got all these extra complexity. If you're making web pages, it's pretty easy to knock them out and throw up a host somewhere. With mobile, not only have you got to build specific, pretty much for iOS and Android, which are very different systems, you've then got to get through the review process into the app stores for people to use. Now, there are tools to make that easier. There's tools like you can make a progressive web app. They can't easily get the app store unless you wrap it up. You can use React Native, which is a technology which can help with that. But what tends to happen is a lot of the companies that use a lot of React Native, they end up building so much specific stuff for each Android and iOS implementation. They eventually, that's the number of times they've thrown it away and said, let's just stick to pure native implementations. So you've got a lot extra to deal with mobile applications. But even then, standard process is you design, pick your design, how you want it to look, someone will build the logic into it, and then you can push it out. With Bravo, we do it in a slightly different way. We've built a fully native, what I would call kernel, which kind of executes the design. So we're pulling in the design from Figma. We're pulling in the connections to Firebase. We're pulling in the business logic from Zara. And what that means is that the app becomes dynamic. You don't have to, particularly as we push the logic out to the back end, then we can update, change the logic without having to change the app. And I don't know if any of you built apps, but that app update process is another thing that makes it not. You don't need to make an immediate change. Unless you go through an expedited process, you're looking at several days before anything sees it. So being able to kind of not have to minimizing the impact of that and try to use these API systems to be able to give you more leverage means you can do a lot more with a lot less effort, a lot faster. But I say, any questions? I haven't really asked them yet, so anyone can put questions. So I'm just going to do a quick demo. So what I'm going to do is I've done this as a video because we had some problems with Wi-Fi yesterday. So please, if anyone's not sure out there, it's not clear on screen, so this one is quite small. I'll stop it. So, on the screen. So what I'm going to do here is going to set Okay, so what I've got here, this is a Figma design. So I don't know if you've seen Figma before. Figma is a tool where designers, like pretty much anybody who wants to collaborate on designing any kind of user interface or workflow, it's a fantastic tool for that. And that's why I just sold $5 billion. They're a very smart company. They've done some amazing things, particularly around collaboration. Historically, design was a horribly difficult process, with files being thrown around the place. There are billion-dollar companies like Envision built just to help the design process. It's been a crazy place. But Figma came along and said, look, let's do all this in the web. And the other thing they did was also make it really easy to access their stuff in API. So it's a great product. But anyway, so this is pretty much how often you end up with design. You end up laying out all the screens of an application. This is a mobile application for recipes. And what we've actually we'll go through some things. We have a bunch of screens here. What you may notice, which I think I'll highlight in a second, we have a few tags. So the only thing about Bravo that's different from normal Figma designs, we have these tag annotations to help Bravo understand how the app fits together. But pretty much other than that, this is exactly the layout you normally have in an application design. And you can see there's a few screens for the in-app purchase, which I'll touch on later, some interest screens, assets, like a splash screen, all the things you need, assets you need for an application. The other thing that's great about Figma, and most design tools there, is you can also highlight the prototyping. So you can see how the flow of the app goes to work. Pressing where goes to where. All that can be laid out and can be discussed as a team, collaboratively. So, and most people will do that. And normally they'll be handing over to devs to kind of implement. Now, what we do. Okay, so here, I'm now jumped to Bravo. So I'm going back to Bravo, and what we do in Bravo. So this is a Bravo screen, and again, because Figma is completely web-based, we can just pull in the URL, drop the URL into Bravo, and say connect. And now what we're doing now is we're building a connection between Bravo and the Figma design. And this carries on. So if you make changes to Figma, we can also do those changes. And Bravo's pulling in all of the images, text, navigation, how everything works, into a format that our sort of kernel can execute and connect to other APIs. That's right. So at this point here, we have all that in, and as you can see, I can go publish, and from this I can generate an APK or an IPA, which is effectively the bundle that you need to put into App Store. So I can take that design and I can push it through to an App Store within a few seconds. So, I mean, it's a very fast process. Now, the key thing here, though, is that that's just the start. That gets us the content. And the other tools can do that. I'm not saying that's amazing. It's great for people here, but we think it's much more powerful. So let me. And this is actually where professional design comes in. So, although we brought the design in from as I mentioned before, the key thing really is about the dynamic nature. How do you make it connect and drive? Normally we build logic. And what we do is we say, hey, Sam, you're great at logic. You build the logic for us and give us an API and wrap it all up and hide the complexity of what needs to be done and just give us what we need. So I've just done an example here. So we've got two screens next to each other. Once we're on the right, this is Xano. These are the definitions of the API request. So within Xano, there's a whole logic, the database is stored, and it presents these API requests, which is these contracts of delivering functionality to where it is. And what we're going to do is, in the same way that we pulled the design in, the Figma, we basically get the API definitions and pull the ability to access that stuff from Xano. So let's So what happens is, so I'm going through it. Effectively, there's several queries here, several APIs here. I'm just going to range of them, and then we'll go over to Bravo. We'll go over to Bravo, and the way that Xano works is it uses an API key. Just dropping the API key into our Xano wizard integration means it can access all this thing. So we put the API key in, and immediately we can see all of our system in Xano. That's the instance we're on, which is the sort of main overall thing. This is the group of APIs, and as you can see, that list is the same on the right side. So we can see all the APIs. I can pick up the ones I want, and then in about 3 seconds, we can pull that in. So we've now got the connection to Xano as well. So not only have we got the connection to Figma, we've made the connection to Xano. And the final piece of all this is the thing I'll do next, which is putting them together. So we've got the ability to have a list of them there. We now have to connect the elements of those APIs to our design. Because that's really the magic of it. This is the key part of what we offer in our platform, is to be able to connect that API to the API, to the design elements. So I'll just stop it briefly. So what's happening here is in the design there was a single box. And one of the key parts of when we leverage the elements of design, we allow you to connect multiple elements to an API, and so Bravo will transform the design to handle that. So if we say, hey, look, I've got a box here, I've got a number of elements coming from the API, which will repeat in the box. Bravo will repeat that part of the design multiple times as the number of elements are, and allow you to update the pieces in the design that come from the API. So it's kind of like the sort of looping logic you would have somewhere else, but it's effectively being driven through the API. And that, so we just connect that piece up. So first of all, we say, okay, this is the list we want to connect. And then we say, okay, within that box, the list, within the box, I've got title that I need to connect. This is actually where I went wrong. So I have to correct this. I should pick a name, but I don't pick a name. Anyway, the point is that you can take pieces from API and connect directly to it. And the thing is, what's great about Bravo is it works both ways. This is not just putting content in. We can also say, hey, this text field in design, we want it to be a field that we posted out to an API. So we can collect data, we can collect images, collect videos, push them out. So we collect the 3 things up, and that is basically, the app is now fully dynamic based on data being driven by Xano's API. So in the space of minutes, none of this is sped up. That would be the standard build process. Taking a design, connecting to existing APIs, you have got some core functionalities in that process. I will just set the next piece. Sorry, any questions on that? That's a little bit, it may not be. Good. So, that's it. Right. Now, so why this is interesting, it's kind of going back to what I said before. Often, particularly with mobile, it's annoying to change things. But because we are putting the logic into the backend, it means that we can change things easily. So, rather than us just, it's pretty easy to, if you've got everything set up, to change the data. But changing what the data is looking at would be much harder to do for an application. So in this video, now I've got actually here, so we've got Bravo on one side. On the right hand side, this is a direct connection to my other app. This isn't a separator. This is my app that's just got a screen. And what we're doing here is I'm going to see, you can see the app, and you can see also that this list of recipes here, this is actually coming from Xano. So this is, if the design is in one box, the app is generating all the boxes pulling data from Xano. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, right, I screwed up, and actually I don't want to have the actual name of the recipe. I want to have, and this is an example, I'm going to use the number of people in that field instead. So I'm completely changing where data's coming from. So again, in a normal situation, this would require a new release potentially. With Bravo, we can just change it in the backend, change Bravo connector, and then refresh the app, which would normally be closing the app and starting it up, and immediately it's changed. So we changed how the logic's connected just by using the APIs in this way. Not changing, like pushing the logic away to the places where it's easier to change. We make things much faster. And what we're finding is, our customers tell us that with Bravo, they're operating at it's trite, but like 10 times as fast as they were when they were using it. With less people too. I'm not saying it solves every problem, but for a vast majority of use cases, it means you can move incredibly fast and still having a beautiful design, because you have that thing, by always leveraging the best of the job, you have way more flexibility with having a sort of standard template for that. And then at the same time, I created it, I've updated it, and that's back to being fully working application. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Yeah. Is there a limit in the design at Figma for the transfer of all the data that you design to Cloud?
There are limitations. What we tend to find though is that often, you've probably seen this in designs, when people design a design, they normally design every variation because they kind of have a prototype. It's like, this is screen one, when you scroll down a bit more, scroll down a bit more. With Bravo, you don't need to do that because you can actually make it driven from data. So often what happens is we get a design, we can say, look, you can get rid of all the different variations because you can actually make the app for when you want to show it to people, or even when it's working, you can be driven from data. So it actually often we massively reduce the design needs. Having said that, if you've got to 100 screens, then there are certain limitations to what we can do with Figma, which some things we're working on. Particularly, we've just launched the Figma plugin to make the sort of annotation process easier, and that gives us a lot more options for doing it. So we haven't really had a massive issue with limitations just yet.
Okay. And so, for example, instead of making actual pages, you go for making illustrations. Do you have limits there too, or you just treat them as images?
So what tends to happen is in the importing process, what we do is we leverage Figma to basically rasterize the inputs. So if there's complex images, as much as possible, try and keep them as SVGs, but sometimes we get masters from Figma. So it looks almost exactly, pretty much the same as you see on the Figma screen. But yeah, we tend to turn images where we can to certify.
Hello, first of all, thank you, very neat. I'm actually very impressed by the UX of the tool, so good so far. My question is regarding the evolution of your tool. So what you showed us is mainly, so we can do front end thanks to integration with Figma, we can do back end, so we have data modeling and we have UI modeling. And my question would be, like, in the future of Bravo, do you want and will we be able to actually interact with some other tools that are more about maybe visual scripting to script some interactions and logic, business logic maybe in the app, and also on the part of the workflow management, such as of course Make, will we be able maybe to trigger some side events thanks to some UI and data from Xano, this kind of whole overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, the way you think of it is that thinking of having API connections into the application. So, for example, let me give you an example with favoritism. So we've implemented favoritism. So we implement state change. We use variants from things to state change and the actual icon changing. Yeah. But we can connect to an API. So you could have if your API, and so I mean all that flexibility is the back end, right? And so I mean. You'll state with them, say, when you press the button, it will the API request to say, okay, change the state of this to this user, to favorite that for this user. So the logic goes over back from the app. So you can put it wherever you want. If you want to build it yourself, that's fine. If you want to build it inside, that's fine. We're really trying to make it so API become the way of connecting to the design. So that, and there are a number of advantages to this. It means that we can leverage Figma a lot more. And it means that you're not stuck in a particular tool. The way that we see some of we think it's important that people have as much choice as possible. Because often what happens is with many tools, you go, it's really good at this, but it doesn't quite do this as well as the other tool over here. So if I could just have a bit of this and a bit of that, that would be a great combination. And actually, we've seen that in normal development. Nocode exploded with the whole ability to interconnect everything. And rather than being stuck with IBM, where you had to buy everything from one person and nothing to communicate properly, now, with the ability to pick and choose functionality to suit what you need, you can really get bespoke to what you want. You get to a limitation on cost, you get a cheaper system. A limitation in speed, you get a more expensive system how to speed. And so what we're trying to do is say, look, we need to think about it. It's very powerful to use APIs as much as at lower level as possible with the design, so you have that flexibility. So, I mean, people have done crazy stuff. As I say, this is a long answer, sorry. But yeah, I mean, with Bravo, because you've got that ability, because you have the flexibility of design with APIs, you could do all sorts of stuff. Way more than we thought was possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so the last thing is the app. So just the app that I was showing you is Recipe. What I really wanted to show you was the scope of what's possible, because often people think, okay, so you've got a design, you can just do a few screens and a list, that's great, but does it actually do anything that's useful? And the answer is yes, lots of things we can do with it. We've just launched the ability to do in-app purchases, which is one of the groups of users that uses Bravo is content creators. I mean, they love. There's a lot of people out there generating content for their users, and there's tools that help them do that, but they're really expensive. Because in-app purchases, to implement in-app purchases in mobile applications is really quite complicated and hard. And what we've done, and you saw in the earlier Figma design, you have a few screens saying there's a paywall here, there's a pay screen here. And then you have to set up some config in the back end, but that's pretty much it. And then everything's dealt with. And the API we use here is Revenue Cap. So again, we're leveraging these external tools with APIs to be able to get that functionality without having to do a ton of work. So I'll just do a quick video. So this is an app. It's in the App Store. I'm not pretending anything here. It's in the App Store with a test account. We'll go into it. And again, you've got all the app functionality, all this data has been pulled in from Xano. You can see, you can scroll through it, you can upscreen, video connections, all the sorts of normal things in that. But the really powerful thing is, in your app, when you want to say, right, you've seen my free content, now you have to pay, we've got the direct ability to go to pick your course and then to get Google, get the payment through Google, which is, for us, this is a very big thing because this is really, really hard to do. I mean, very few people provide that, particularly with flexibility. I mean, this opens up a whole bunch of great use cases where, again, we're trying to drive going back to the original point, we're trying to get people to get outcomes. We want to let people make as little friction, limit the friction as much as possible to be able to get to what they want to do. And the content creators is, how do I get my content to my users? They want to use mobile because that's what users are, but mobile development is such a pain. So we want to help them make that process as easy as possible. Okay, I just do one more slide. So what's next? So I think the three things that are interesting for me, one is that I think we're going to see more people trying to do more with APIs. APIs are a very powerful construct, but they're a bit esoteric. Let me ask you another question now. How many people have tried to build something API and had no problems at all? How many people have tried to build something API and had lots of problems? Right. So, I mean, this is kind of the thing. Right? APIs are difficult, and we need to make them easier because they open up so much potential. The second point is, I think this is something that I'm really working on now. Connecting pre-built backends to pre-designed frontends. So imagine that Figma design, and this is the really powerful thing about the Figma community. There are thousands of designers out there building example UIs. Imagine if they built lots and lots of example UI frontends, right? With Bravo, we could take that, we could go to a couple of designers and say, right, have you got a content creator backend? And there is one, and they've just built a great feature called Snippets, which lets you have like a template for backends, database schema, and a bunch of APIs already preset that we can just pull in. So we could pull that snippet in from Xano, we could pull that Figma example file from the community, and then you just use Bravo to connect together, and you're done. You've got something that can be used incredibly powerfully. And I think this is the sort of thing, we helping people get their use cases faster is going to be a really interesting trend. And the third one I think is going to be super fun also is no-code tools, building tools on top of other tools like SASAS or like SAS, I don't know. But effectively, you could use tools like Bravo. A couple of examples. So when I was at Platform, we saw a company called Envoy, which is like an entry management system for businesses where they let people in and try to touch a name in the pages. And the funny thing about it was it looked exactly like Platform. And so we were like, can we build this? So in a hackathon, using APIs, we built a Envoy substitute. Right? So if you can build, and that's interesting because Envoy is a big company, and they spend a lot of money building their amazing technology, but because of no-code tools and building on other SaaS tools, you're going to be able to compete with tools companies like that much more effectively because they're not all looking at these tools because they don't think they work well. So there's a lot of opportunity. Another one is Chexology. So Chexology is a weird name, but they're basically a company for hotels and their concierge. They take a picture of your bag, take a picture of you, and you use that instead of a ticket to get a bag. It's a very simple idea. With Bravo, you could do it in about 5 minutes, but they charge a ton of money, and they're a big company based on that core idea. And so by leveraging these sort of SaaS techniques and business services, you can get way more done than was possible before. That's it. Yeah.
What I understood is that the design comes from the people and the database from what about the logic? Because you were mentioning that you can hide or show depending on the flows, depending if they have data or not. How do you do it?
So a couple of ways. So we've got the simplest way in Figma. What we do is we have a way of saying this element is conditionally this, right? So and then we connect it to anything. So I mean I've done this a number of times with Xano. What's great about Xano is it not just stores the data, but you can very easily build. Actually, getting commission. You can very easily build logic on top of your data. So in Xano, you can have your data and you can build some logic around to say, hey, if this is this type of screen, then this value should be true or false. And that API then feeds into Bravo to say hide or don't hide that block. So really, I mean, and this is all. Although we've built connectors to a few things like Airtable and Xano, Bravo is fundamentally about generic APIs. We try and make it so it works with as many possible things as we can, which creates a huge amount.
Money question this time. You talked about aggregating a lot of tools, speaking a little bit of that on that tool and that tool. In the end, it means that we could be using a lot of different tools, so a lot of different tools that cost a different amount of money. So in the end, aren't you? Well, it's an open question. But aren't you scared about the fact that it could actually repeal the users to have to use various tools to subscribe on all those tools and pay for all the tools and maybe yours too?
Absolutely, that's always going to be a problem. But I mean, it's true. I mean, if you look at the value versus the cost,
okay.
I mean, it's something we need to try and get better at to try and make it simpler to simplify the building of these things. But I mean, most of it, there's a lot of tools out there that give you a certain amount of functionality. Xano gives you some functionality for free. So if you're doing very small things or things with small amounts of data, then you don't need to worry about it. Or there's enough alternatives. So even if one is a problem, you've got another way to do it. And I guess this is a trade-off, right? If you want to go to one big provider that does everything and pay them that money and simplify it that way, then that works. If you want to have the flexibility, then the trade-off is that you might have a couple of sources. But the beauty is, even if if one gets too expensive, you can just switch it out for a different one. You give you choice, and to me, that's always a benefit.
Wow, pretty neat. Thank you.
There are ways to do manual requests, or only with the apps that you provide, that you already have.
What do you mean by manual requests?
Like imagine that I want to connect another database that you can cover. I can call
sorry, this is what I mean. So I mean, I haven't in one of my videos that shows it, but the way that we work with APIs. Fundamentally, we have these visits which are built on top of our requests. And we have the way you normally build a request up manually, it very much looks like Postman. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So you can build a request up manually, or you can use a wizard. But it has a lot of, what I haven't touched on today is, the thing about APIs is there's a lot of different ways of doing that. So different authentications, there's lots of different ways of structuring data, but we try and give as many options as possible. So you can connect almost everything.
You also have the Swagger import too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more technical, but so we have, as well as the Salon import and the edit import, we have the ability to take Swagger and Swagger and which are basically definitions of APIs. Which in many places actually support. So, it's something that it's super important to have that.
You mentioned the hotel app where you can take a picture. So with Bravo Studio, you can unlock the native sensors and devices on your phone.
I mean, we've unlocked a bunch of them. We haven't unlocked them all. But yes, so native camera, native location, there's a bunch of things we've unlocked, so you can do that. And we try to do it in a way that, again, generically works. So you take a picture, it then pushes up a URL that the services can connect. Great. Thank you very much.